Okay, so welcome everyone. I got 3 cameras on me. I don't know which one to look at. This is my live Q&A. We decided to open it up to everyone and turn it into a podcast. This is usually only completely exclusive for my current clients. And basically it comes on here twice a week, every Wednesday and Sunday, for a half hour. I provide guidance, then we dive straight into Q&A with my clients, and this is how we do it. So now, for the first time ever, we're going to be turning it into a podcast. Podcasts will be released every Thursday and Monday, right, Ken? That's kind of the plan.
That's correct.
But if you want to do a sneak peek in literally a sneak peek of the podcast, we are doing it live every single Wednesday and Sunday. I think we're going to choose Instagram as the platform. And literally, yeah. So we just do the guidance. We cut it off right before, literally right before all the clients ask their questions. We just do the podcast. Don't know the name of my podcast yet, but we always start out with, what are we celebrating? What are we celebrating? And I guess, of course, today I'm celebrating day 1 of my podcast. Super, super, super exciting for me. And the podcast will probably only be 20 minutes to a half an hour, twice a week. Still trying to think of a name. Super nervous right now because it's my first one. And especially for the huge news I'm going to share, which makes me almost want to puke right now. Literally, bleh. Okay, good. There was someone watching me on Instagram and then they went away. So I'm like, now I feel better. Okay, now I can tell my story. We're really, really good. First of all, I'm going to start out with the importance of all this, you guys. When you're expressing yourself, you need to decide which modality is best for you. And there's a huge room for audio on the social media playground happening right now. But you know what? You need to decide if you're an artist who loves to draw graphics, if you're a writer, if you're a video person, if you're an audio person. I get really uncomfortable with video, and I have like 3 videos on me right now. And I've only gotten comfortable because I practice with it. My most comfortable form is writing. So I will always write a blog post to follow my podcast. And I'm always going to do audio too. I just love audio. I love audio. Hence why we did podcasts. So writing audio is my thing. And I just want to thank you so much for being on my first podcast and sharing my journey. And it's a very momentum point in my life. And literally I decided to do a podcast just because I'm all about opening my life to everyone, to helping them out. I am Brittany from Just Be Coaching, to which I run a life coaching company that helps often women skyrocket their business. And I am a chakra cleanse coach, so I add a bit of spiritual insight and energy work. And then I'm also a seduction profile expert, so I do a lot of relationship coaching. So that's what I'm here today. But really, ultimately, this whole podcast and is really guidance, me sharing my story, and all of us moving towards being a calm, confident, centered individual in our life. Okay? And making decisions that align with that. So in the month of December, I'm going to start my story. And for those of you who are listening to this podcast and this live, I'm about to tell you, which is a very hard story, the story about how I decided to get an abortion. And I had my abortion yesterday. So we're going to start my podcast with a really heavy subject that I might get fairly emotional of, but it's a story that I need to tell. So my first podcast is my abortion story. And December, so this is last month, December of 2019, it had, I had noticed holes in my business, because basically, if you guys follow my journey, I was literally really, really poor, and then my business grew a whole bunch. You know, what I made in a year, I made in a month in 2018, and it just got crazy, and, you know, I just grew too fast. So it was really hard to organize my business and check my numbers, and I neglected some things and whatnot. So there had been, you know, really huge peaks in my business, which I'm so happy that I'm learning to solve so that I can help my clients today. But in December, you know, things were really getting bad and slowing down, and Christmas was coming. And Christmas is always hard because I am a motherless daughter, which is always very, very, very hard for me at Christmas. And the lead up to Christmas is always brutal. My mom died of colon cancer when I was 28 years old. And it's been brutal every Christmas to be without her. And so I was suffering from really literally just missing my mom. And going through that, thinking about her lots, and I, you know, it's been 6 years without her, and I was like, wow, when am I going to get over this? And it's always been, you know, it's a huge grieving process. And the shit that hit the fan as December came on made me miss my mom even more. It's just like super, super hard. Okay. So then beginning of December, wow, I can't even tell the time, Ken. You're going to have to let me know when it's, I don't know, 25 minutes, 7:25, I guess. Because I'm just going to keep on sharing my story. So, you know, a couple days came into December. Leading up to December, I also got a $34,000 lawyer bill. Which just choked me out financially, and this is on top of my business expenses, my mortgage, everyday living. So financially, things, you know, were making me a bit nervous. And really that's where December 2019 started to unravel, and I was just like, okay, getting poor from this huge lawyer's bill I have to pay. Okay. And, you know, I was just going about my life, running my business, being real busy. You know, when you're a businesswoman, you don't always, you're not always in tune with yourself, right? And really, I was a bit disconnected because I just missed my mom so much. Missed her so terribly much. So I was just going through the motions of my business, kind of for those of you who are just joining on the live watching, this is my first podcast that will be launching officially tomorrow. This is just a sneak peek, and it is literally my abortion story, how I had an abortion yesterday. I just can't believe I'm even talking about it this soon. So thank you so much for sharing my journey. I know how risky this is too, but I don't care. I think everyone needs to hear this story. So I had this huge financial burden in the beginning of December, and I had went out with a friend who also happens to be one of my breakthrough coaches in my business, and she had broken her thumb, and I was helping her get groceries, and she's like, you know, we were talking about Just Be coaching, and she's like, anyways, tell me what's, you know, what's going on. Like, not in the business, Brittany, in your personal life, okay? And I said, you know, like, not that I'm really worried, but I've missed my period. And she's like, oh, you should get a pregnancy test just to have a peace of mind. And that's where, like, it all went downward, because I took the test at her house, came out of the bathroom, and I was just shocked. And she's like, what? I'm like, it's positive. And she had like a little smile, and she's like, well, you know, congratulations. And it was such it was just like this surreal kind of panic that was going over me. And I didn't really know what to do. And at this point too, by the way, this wasn't like cut and dry, like, oh my God, this is so hard to admit. I wasn't real clear on who the father was. So I think that made it even more horrible for me, and that's where like panic really started to truly set in. And so there we were, and she was, you know, I think what I've learned about this whole experience, really one of the biggest things, is that every woman handles the situation differently. And I cannot, you know, another woman in the exact same situation as me could have definitely chose to keep the baby. And at that point, I didn't even know what to do. You know, there's so much going through your head. Whose is it? Am I even going to keep the baby? What the fuck do I do? I'm just like, is that even like, maybe it's a false positive? So I made sure to, the first thing I did was I went and told the biggest support in my world, and that is my sister. When you don't have a mom, some people wouldn't even tell their moms, but when you don't have a mom, you know, my biggest support was her. And even took me a while. I showed up at her house and I just acted normal. And it took me a while to tell her. And I ended up telling her in my car when I was about to leave her house. And it was just like, what do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Oh my God, what are you going to do? And sometimes you just feel like you really have to make a decision right away. But the reality is that you actually don't right away. And the moral, I guess, of my story too is I just went to work the next day. I took the pregnancy test again in the morning, and then I went to work the next day, and it was again positive. And I didn't really tell anyone, even because I have a whole team, right? I have a whole team I could tell. And I hadn't told anyone the first day because I was just, you know, you're just kind of in shock at first. So there I was with this tremendous news of like, oh my God, there's the news that I'm pregnant. In shock, at work. So I'm at work, I'm just going through my days, you know, trying to keep my mind off of it, interacting with my team. There was a lot of things flowing through my head, like how am I going to run my business and have a kid? And that day, for whatever reason, I went and you know, one of the issues in my business was because I was an entrepreneur, I didn't have a backup plan. So I had blown through, and with all these lawyers' bills, I had blown through literally all my savings. Okay? I just saw the time, it's 20 after. So I just moved the camera a bit. I'd blown through all my savings, and I was really relying on my MasterCard for savings. And basically what had happened was they had restricted my savings literally down to, like, not my savings, my limit. It used to be, because I was a business owner, it was $16,800, I think, and it was $13,500, and I had literally paid off a huge lump sum on it from my backup just to make sure I didn't acquire interest. Long story short, they decided for whatever reason they didn't like that I made that big payment, that I had literally paid everything down to zero. They cut my, they literally cut my, you know, my money down to $3,300 that I can spend, which left me $17 for December. And that was the day after I found out I was pregnant. So I was just ready to go off the deep end. And even phoning them, they're like, well, no, it's just, you know, policy. Everyone who I talk to, I'm like, well, geez, my credit's good. You know, I even paid you guys off in time. Why'd you cut me down? It's just policy. later I had learned too that the Canadian government was really restricting people that year, encouraging credit card companies to restrict people so that we didn't overspend. But either way, long story short, I was left with $17 in December as a businesswoman with a team, literally 17, and pregnant with an unwanted pregnancy. So this was something that I just didn't even know how to get through. And I ended up selling everything like I usually do. Just like sell everything you can, do a bunch of card readings. What's your go-to skill? You know, so I made sure to book some card readings to make a bit of money. But even then, I had a team to pay, and no money for Christmas. My family, you know, didn't get any Christmas presents from me. It was literally like a wild December for me, and I literally went into a deep depression. I'd never, you know, you always think you always think that you know what depression is, but I'm quite a healthy person. I teach mindset techniques for a living, and you always think that you understand depression, but I realized for the first time last month that I had never been depressed. I had bad days, and not this time. This was depression, a deep fucking black hole that I just couldn't climb out of. And I don't know if it was the hormones or whatnot. And I had went to the doctor fairly soon, and they give you time to make a decision. And the doctor right away, this is where the medical system gets kind of weird on me, but the doctor right away told me to not tell either of the fathers because he was worried about them talking me out of it. And then, you know, in the middle of all my depression, I got this deep fear of being abandoned by everyone. You know, like everything that had happened, no money, found out I was being pregnant, and missing my mom so much, just put me right to, and then getting depressed, put me right to rock bottom. And I actually went into this deep root chakra survival mode, afraid of being abandoned if I told anyone, afraid of what people would say. Okay, I see that. And I don't know, Ken, you can always talk to tell me the time, okay, because I think this podcast should be very, like, my deal with this podcast should always, like, be fairly raw and just literally what happens.
You have to remember I used to actually work in an actual TV studio at one point, so I'm used to that kind of stage management.
And I have no idea what it means, so just speak it out. He was just trying to tell me the time, which is funny. So, yeah, it was literally 7:25. Apparently that was the motions he was making.
Yeah, I was doing a 2 and a 5.
So, okay. I'm clearly going to go over, that's okay. So, you know, go back and forth. Am I going to keep it? Am I not? Oh my God, I can't keep it. Oh my God, I'm so poor. I have $17. How am I going to actually do it? And then you start telling people for support and start looking for your support networks. And here's the crazy thing about this. You start telling people and you actually don't know whether someone is pro-life or pro-choice or what they're going to say until you actually tell them. Because it's not like everyday common conversation. So I told people who I thought would be supportive of me. And even in all my thinkings of should I keep it, you know, you evaluate all the options. And the moments after you find out that you're pregnant when you're considering abortion, you just get so much replay in your head. And one of the things was I was really ashamed to be 34 years old and not be able to care for the baby. I think that's what shook me, because abortion is really like, I always saw like a young girl thing, right? I actually don't know, I still to this day don't know any women who have gotten abortions in their 30s. All the women who had gotten abortions who I got support from, who were older than me, all got them in their 20s. So that there was like a bit of it just being ashamed for not having my life together by the time I was 34, because I had a business to run, and was that okay for me to choose my business and choose to build it, because it would totally put a halt on things. And here's another issue too. I had support, but I didn't have the same supports like for someone like my sister did. Because here I was 34 years old, and if this would have happened 20 years ago, there would have been more, or even 10 years ago. When my sister had her baby 20 years ago, there was so much support for her because my mom was still around. And there was, all sides of the family. And for me, it just got to be really hard, because when I looked at my support, I do have lots of support, but when I say support, like, it's not like someone who's going to be here hands-on helping me raise a baby. People will help you, sure, but I didn't have the hands-on helping me raise a baby, especially as an entrepreneur. Because I just really love being an entrepreneur. And I know why I'm doing this. And I know that I really still want to build my business. And I know what a year could do in a year. It could be totally different. So I literally... Peggy just joined us. Yeah. Peggy, when did she join us?
Only about a minute and a half.
Okay, Peggy. I'm literally in the middle of my guidance, and as you know, we're filming my first podcast, and this is really hard for me to say, because again, you never know if someone's pro-life or pro-choice. I'm telling my story about how I got an abortion yesterday, which is a really hard story, and my story leading up to it. So, thank you, Peggy, for watching and sharing, and this is going to be a hell of a story.
Love heart from Peggy.
Yeah, thank you. Which is crazy, because, the anesthetic technically just 100%, they wouldn't even let me drive early on this morning. I'm not in a lot of pain, but it's just a really great time for me to tell my story, because it's so new and raw. So, oh boy, where was I? Hold on.
We're talking about hands-on support.
Hands-on support. I didn't have the hands-on support, and I also thought, it'd be, because my mom is dead, I'd heavily rely on the father's mother. And I had no guarantees there, right? Because and I also thought, did I want either of these men in my life forever? Because they are in your life forever when you raise a child. There's a lot of people who don't know this, who are going to find out listening to my podcast tomorrow, which is crazy. So I apologize. If I didn't tell you, it's just simply because I was processing my own stuff, especially if you are my family or friends listening. One reason why you don't tell a lot of people is because you have to make the best decision for you. And as soon as you start telling people, there's all these opinions, and I wanted my opinions to be mine. And everyone says children are a gift. And after my experience, I cannot agree more. Children are the biggest gift ever. And even those that are unborn. And I said that, right? Like, I was in my program, 2 clients, I always talk about checkpoints. It's just a checkpoint. You're in a checkpoint. The universe is testing you on how committed you are to your goals. Well, now I was like dealing with human life as a checkpoint, and it was really, really, really difficult to be like, well, here's the thing. The universe knows that we have a choice. And that when babies are sent to you, it's very aware that we have a choice to continue with that pregnancy or not. And this baby was a gift to me because I had been coasting along for way too long. I'm really good at taking risks. I'm really good at leaning into my fear. But for Brittany's standards, I was coasting along. So it was kind of like a, are you going to, you can pick decision A or B. Can I just maybe get a Kleenex box?
Oh, sure.
Please, thank you. You can pick A or B, which really comes to the moral of my story. There's lots of morals here. But the thing is, my fears were, am I, just checking the time, oh, we're still good.
7:33.
I'm going to try and wrap it up in 15 minutes. Am I going to regret it? Now, why would I regret it? Because you can't replace space and time. You'll never have the same baby again. What if I can't have children in the future? I'm freaking 34. Remember how I said women in their 30s, never heard of anyone in their 30s getting an abortion. In fact, when I went yesterday to get my abortion, I was like the oldest woman there getting it. And so you're like, okay, well, fertility only lasts for so long. And so what if I can't have it again? Or what if I'm, regret my decision? And here's the thing with decisions, everyone, is, and this was the biggest thing for me that I've been talking about, in that when we have a decision to make, whatever path we take, see, here's the issue, and for me it's like, and this happens to women who get abortions all the time. They go, okay, I made that decision. I made decision B, the termination. But what if I would have actually had the baby? What would have it been like? What would the baby been like? What would it grow up like? What, oh my God, what did I miss out on? And that comes with every single decision. Okay? So the decision, whatever decision you pick, no matter what, I urge you, because regret is one of the biggest things in our life, I urge you to stand behind it. And that's how I keep on going today. And I think in the end of it, everyone went, wow, Brittany, I'm just kind of shocked how you could just make this decision. Why did you make this decision? So here's the answer why I actually ended up having an abortion in the end. Is because I wanted the potential father to have a chance to go live his dreams. And I knew that his dreams weren't possible with a child. And I'm not here to lock anyone down. But most importantly, I made it for myself and my dreams. And that is, I cannot raise a baby on my own right now because I really have a purpose and my business to actualize, and I believe in all the women that I want to help. And my business isn't quite where it wants to be right now. And in a year it can be completely different. And people are like, well, it's never a right time to have a baby. I had $17 to live off of in December after all those things. It's like, And then I'm an entrepreneur. I wanted to actualize things. And then thirdly, I'm just like, I cannot place that burden on other people because I literally needed more hands on deck to help me raise it. Everyone was like, oh, it's okay. Single moms do it all the time. Yeah. But I don't want to be that. I didn't want to be that. And you know what? Congratulations. I always say, women in different situations, I always respect all their decisions. And it was one of those things where I was like, I didn't want to do that. I didn't have the money. I just went through probably the worst financial month of my whole life. And it was a hard month because it was close to Christmas. I don't have my mom to help me raise it. So I was relying on my dad and sister, which would have placed a huge burden on them. And I didn't want to, I did not want my 66-year-old dad to help me raise a child. I did not want my sister who had adult children to help me raise it. And when it came down to it, I actually didn't have lots of hands-on deck support. And this was one of the hardest decisions I've ever had to make. And I made it because I always teach, you have to think, talk, do all your actions aligned with your goals. And my primary goal was not to be a single mom, which I knew when I aligned it up that that's a good chance where I would be headed. So, meanwhile, I go to the doctor, they send me for an ultrasound. And then they couldn't find the ultrasound. So I never ever, did 100% at that time find out who the father was. Which killed me for a moment in time. And then I was dropped, because ultrasound was December 13th. Then I was dropped for the Christmas and the New Year's season, missing my mom. Everyone went on Christmas holidays and New Year's. My doctors kind of just forgot about it. I ended up carrying this baby for way longer than I wanted. And it was hard because the longer I carried it, the more unethical it seemed. So I finally ended up advocating a bit and made sure to make lots of phone calls. And it was the gynecologist admin assistant who finally found my ultrasound. And I just felt like I kept on getting dropped by the medical system. When I finally went to go see the gynecologist. By the way, let's back this story up. Back to my support and when you tell people. There was actually a surprising amount of people who said, I support you no matter what, Brittany, but there was a surprisingly amount of people who were very inappropriate. And it's not like I told people who I thought I'd get support from. I also felt guilty too, because I told one of my friends where him and his wife had been, trying to have a baby for, God, must be like 2 years. There's people trying to have babies all the time, then I go, whoops, there I am, pregnant. People who can't have babies, and this all runs through your head, right? People would love to adopt, and I was starting to get really sick in the mornings too, and I was really low energy and real tired, and it was already affecting my business. But a really close friend of mine said, "Oh, I bet your mom has met your baby." I'm like, I bet she has. And that's fine that you're using that because you're pro-life, but the universe gave me a checkpoint so that I'll stop coasting, because the minute that I coast and the minute that I don't lean into my fear and the minute that I don't live life fearlessly is the minute that I let that unborn child down, because that unborn child gave its life so that I could have a better life. And that's how I look at it. And so that, the father could have a better life. And there's a lot of questions like, you can be a single mom, you're 34, you know, which made me feel even worse, because they were right. I was 34, and why couldn't I do it? Oh, you know, like, you know, have it because, you know, like, don't worry, the government pays you money to have. Okay, so why would I have to be why do I have to put a burden on everyone? And in the end, I realized that having an abortion was actually the most responsible choice. And upon discussions, a lot of times, you know, it gets really scary, you guys, because there's a point in your pregnancy where you don't even like, you're just like, well, you know, you're not taking it seriously. And it's like, you can almost just pretend it's not there and just go through and carry it to term. Or go through until it's too late to have an abortion. Like, it was such a hard fucking decision. But when you make a decision, I'm here to urge you guys about any decision in your life. You'll never know what the other decision would have came up as. And there's great things, and also like there's successes and consequences to each decision you make. You know, like the successes of having an abortion would be that I get to continue being an entrepreneur, and I won't have the struggles of a single mom. And, you know, I'll be able to actualize some of these things that I want to actualize. And, oh, we're doing pretty good. Okay. And, but the consequences are, you know, you're taking a life. You're taking a life. And, you may have regret. And you may never be able to have a child again. And, you know, like, you'll regret it later down the road. Those are the consequences. And if I would have picked having the baby, there's so many successes to that, right? But also a lot of consequences. And that is, my business would never be what it is. And I don't think I maybe would have kept on coasting. So here I am today. I have to be very accountable to my goals and aligned with them, and not make shitty decisions, and go forward and take risks and really dive into the exact life I want. And I urge you that whatever decision you make when you have two big decisions to make is literally make one and accept. You have to accept the consequences that go with your decision and the successes. I freed up my life at this point, and yes, I chose to take a life. And that's something I'm going to have to accept. It's always going to be a part of my writing and my chapter and my story now. And something that I always have to accept. Once you make your decision, the other option is taken away. And here's what people do. People go back and go, well, I picked B, but what if I would have picked A? And then their mind and their ego really works it up on what it could have been. What if I would have chose to have the baby? What would it be like? Blah, blah, blah. But you don't know. For all I know, I could have miscarried at 8 months. For all I know, that baby could have died in month 2 of its life. For all I know, I could have died in childbirth. I don't know. So the ego and the mind will take that decision that you didn't make and make it whatever the fuck it wants. And that's the issue. And the issue is that people have such a hard time making decisions that they fucking waste their life. Or they stay stuck in their life. So today, I think this podcast and this guidance and this Q&A, Peggy, is the ability to make decisions and accept the successes and consequences of your decisions. And not let the other option go, what if, because that will keep you stuck in your fear, and it'll keep you stuck. And there it is. So the hardest point yesterday morning, I didn't sleep. Not last night, the night before. The night before the procedure, I didn't sleep. Because I was going back and forth on my decision, right? A little bit. And in the morning, they make you take these pills. They make you insert these pills as high close to your cervix as you can, especially if you're a person who's never been pregnant. And it's to soften and dilate the cervix. And I knew once I took those pills that there was no going back. So it was really hard to take those pills. I was accepting the consequences and the successes of my decision. And in the waiting room, they make it very comfortable for you. But I cried and I cried and I cried. And one thing I always teach you guys is when you're having emotions, I say, check in with your body and ask yourself where you feel it. And I felt it in my heart. So I knew very much it was grief. For not being able to have the baby, or choosing not to. So I had a lot of grief and I cried and I cried. And you always like, the word abortion, it's just like, you're like, it, before you have one, it's just this big thing, you're like, ooh, that's crazy, what's that procedure like? Wow, you always like think the procedure is a lot bigger than what it actually is. So that was kind of nice, but you're awake the whole time. And I grieved it before I went in, and there was pinching, there was suction. Yeah. So, the whole procedure, I think, I was awake for it, but I think it was maybe only 10 minutes. And then you're done. And just so you know, there's not a lot of support by medical personnel. The nurse was great in the OR. Like, amazing. But really, you just go through it, and you have to go through the grief, and we'll see what the next couple days brings for me. But again, I made a promise to myself that I'm no longer going to coast, because this is a sacrifice that was made. There was a life given up so that I could have the life I want, and so could the people around me who I won't be a burden to, nor will the baby be a burden to. And I'm going to accept the consequences of my decision and the successes, and celebrate the successes, and go from there. One of the hardest decisions I've ever made. And I just wanted to share that story with you for this guidance, because I know clients have been wondering what's going on. And I invite you to keep on following my podcast, where we continue to talk about becoming aligned with your goals and being a calm, confident, centered individual. And me speaking my truth. Decisions aren't easy, but one of the big, again, you are stuck because you don't make decisions, and you're always about the what if. Or you do make a decision, and then you're like, what if? So in closing, this weekly challenge, Peggy, those people watching the podcast, listening to the podcast, is commit to making decisions. And stop thinking about if you would have made a different decision, and start accepting that you made certain decisions, and accept the consequences and successes that go with it. I invite you to PM me, text me, reach out in any way you want. Follow the podcast. We're releasing it tomorrow. Join the Facebook group. I got LinkedIn. We'll put it all in the comments. Instagram, and it's just going to be a wild journey. And I invite you guys to join me in living fearlessly and making decisions aligned with the person who we ultimately want to be, and no more coasting. No more coasting. Okay, this wraps up my first podcast, so thank you for listening, and join us again later on this week for number 2.